excuse me. If you want to speak, you need this 2 sign-up sheets out there. You need to sign up. And remember, today is redistricting for the school board and for the county. Good afternoon, sir. I think that's what it says.
Just like this. You'll have to Hey, Ms. Adams, how you doing? All right. I got a service talk to you about Good. I got back there. Yeah. I've been getting hammered all year. Call, email. Now, I heard it.
I like to drive. Usually calls me all the time. And I kind of. Hey, how are you? I'm glad you did. Unless you want to go do public speaking. Oh, thank you. Okay, I have 105. I hope everyone has gotten a chance to get out there and sign up if they want to talk. And I'm going to call the County Commissioners meeting to order at this time.
And I will call the Board of Education to order this time.
Thank you. And at this time, I'd like to do the invocation by Mr. Commissioner Russ May, please.
Bow your heads, please. Thank you, God, for the opportunity to serve and for both boards to serve on behalf of the citizens of Granville County. And thank you for allowing us to live in such a great nation where we are free to say and do as we please, that we are a free people. Lord, a lot of burdens with redistricting and school closures and things that both the boards take on in different capacities. Lord, I pray that you will provide the wisdom and discernment as to both, that you will allow us to be impartial and fair, and we'll listen. And then we'll take the time to listen and provide the opportunities for those to engage so that they may state their heart and what they feel is important to them and their communities. I thank you for everyone that serves on these boards. I pray that we will do things in a just and fair manner. And I thank you most of all for your Son, Jesus Christ. Without his salvation, there would be no eternal life. Give us a good day, Lord. In Christ's name I pray. Amen.
Amen. At this time, we'll have the Pledge of Allegiance. Ms. Glenda Williams.
Would I stand? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you for coming out and being here. We really do enjoy having people on the sidelines just because it makes us feel like we're doing our job the proper way. And if we don't have you there and we don't know what's going on, then we're just kind of in the air. So thank you for being here and taking time out of your day. You have an update?
Yeah, I have a couple of things just to mention. Our superintendent is not here. Her daughter got married, her only daughter got married over the weekend, and she and her husband are now down hiding somewhere. We don't know where, but somewhere, and she just wanted to let you know that is why she is not here. And I have a message from our chair saying that he couldn't be here for business reasons, and he knows that we will work together and trust one another as we move forward in redistricting and making the right decisions, and he wanted me to share that with you.
Thank you very much. At this time, unless anybody has any other questions, we will continue on with the presentation regarding redistricting. And we'll have Brooks, Pierce, McGlinden, Humphrey, Lennar Oh, you guys look like one. Thank you.
Thank you. So it's good to be back. I really enjoyed our last session. I thought it was very collaborative and productive. I left with a list of objectives, of changes that we wanted to make to the map. I wrote those down. I had a few calls with the demographer, and we tried to enact every change that was possible. And I think it might make sense for me to quickly walk through those changes to refresh everybody's recollection and maybe orient the public to what those changes were. The first change was District 1. So as a result of the growth of the various districts, as we redrew the map, the black voting age population in District 1 had dropped significantly, and that's something we needed to correct. And so our primary objective, or the first objective I should say, as we went through redrawing the map, was to try to increase the voting age population for blacks in District 1, and we did so two ways. Well, I guess three ways. First, during the meeting, I spoke with the representatives from District 1, and we tried to identify black communities in the area and kind of the surrounding borders that we could move into District 1 to increase the black communities in the area. Second, I gave a mandate to the demographer. I said, go into the map, look at the demographic data, see if there's any black communities surrounding District 1 that we can move in to increase the population. And then the voting age population is a percentage, so there's a numerator and a denominator, and so the other solution is you can just reduce the denominator. And so what we did is we actually reduced the size of District 1 by moving large white communities into surrounding districts, would therefore increase the ratio of black voters in the district. And so the voting age population on a demographic basis for District 1 increased from 36% black for voting age population to, I believe, I'm going to pull it up, 47.8%. So it's just shy of 50%. We looked for any other way to try to push it above 50%, and we could not find black communities in the area. And any change beyond that would force us into what would be kind of a non-compact district, one that kind of snaked out into other districts and was not similar to what we had seen in District 1. And so at that point, we said this is the best we can do. And so we left it at 47.8%, which was a meaningful shift. The goal was 50%, but we didn't find a way to do that. But as the representatives view the map, as the community views the map, if they see ways to do that, we obviously welcome that. But the demographer, using the information we had, wasn't able to accomplish that. The second instruction that I recall is Antioch Road, which runs right down it runs north and south between District 4 and District 2. Half of Antioch Road is in District 4, half is in District 2. There's a request to move all of Antioch Road, both sides, into District 4. The challenge we had with this, and this is a challenge we had with a number of requests, is, here, I'll describe it and then I'll move over to the map. The other half of Antioch Road, it covers several different census blocks, right? And so when we make changes to the map, we try to move entire census blocks at one time because we know the population information for those census blocks. The problem with moving Antioch Road is it traversed several census blocks, and so in order to move just that side of the road, we would have had to move several census blocks along with it, which would have thrown District 4 and District 2 out of balance. And so I'll just point to the area, but I know I'm walking away from the mic. But moving Antioch Road would have actually required us to move all of these census blocks, because if they moved north, they moved east and west into District 4, which we weren't able to do because it would have interfered with the total population guardrails that we were having to be mindful of. The next issue we tried to address was trying to extend, I would say, the northeastern part of District 5 to capture some surrounding areas, I believe Commissioner Russ May's area. We ran into a similar issue there. It was a simple request to try to move part of a road with some surrounding neighborhoods, but that road traversed 3 different census blocks that had very substantial populations. And so in order to just get the small change we wanted, we'd yet again have to move 3 large census blocks from 4 into 5, and 5 was already close to its max, so that wasn't feasible. The next change we addressed was, I believe, I'm forgetting the names of the roads, but it was in between District 6 and 5. I believe there were 2 areas, or at least one area that in the old map had been in District 6 and it got moved into District 5. And Commissioner, if you remember the roads, I think you probably orient us a little better.
It was the Country Lane community.
Yes, it was the Country Lane communities. And similar there, we ran into an issue of, even though we wanted a narrow request, the census blocks that were captured by that request were too large and would have thrown those two districts out of balance. The last request I recall was, I believe, talking to the representatives from District 7 regarding Butner. And I think it wasn't so much of a request, just as an acknowledgement that as we made adjustments to some of the surrounding districts, there might need to be adjustment to District 7 surrounding Butner. And so they essentially said, these are some ways that you can make some accommodations surrounding Butner that would make sense to us. And so we made some of those adjustments as we made changes through 3. District 3 didn't have any requested changes, but District 3 kind of ran through the domino effect, whereas the surrounding districts were being touched upon, District 3 had to shift. And then finally, there was one request that wasn't addressed during the meeting, but came to me by email. And if the board members recall, we sent out I believe, a draft. Sorry, I'm losing count of the numbers. It was draft, what was it? 5. And then we sent a revised draft 5 because we forgot to take a look at a small community that was kind of a pimple on District 6, for lack of a better description. And if the Commissioner, Karen, can remind me of the name of that community, that would.
It's the Paddington Community.
Yes, and so the Paddington community was essentially split between District 5 and 6, and it was a simple request to see if we could move all that district into District 5 to kind of keep that neighborhood or that community whole. And based on the census tracts that needed to be moved, that was a feasible change. And so those are the changes that the board members and the public will see between the last draft map, or the 2 drafts that we presented, and Plan 5, or I guess I should say revised Plan 5, to acknowledge that last change we made. And as of now, from a total population and from a VRA perspective, these maps are compliant. And so I welcome any comments or questions from the commissioners, but I also know that the primary purpose, I believe, is to hear from the public. And so I'm happy to yield the mic to those who would want to come forward.
Board members, any questions?
Yes, I have several, I think. The first one is on Antioch Road. You talked about census blocks, and you didn't describe what that was and how much territory one would entail. Because I sent an email asking about doing part of Antioch Road
Yes, sir.
from Ed Harris to Howard Lane, I think it was.
Yes, sir.
That was from Ed Harris to West Antioch Drive, I'm sorry. And I never got a response. Did you get that information? All right.
I did get the request. I don't have the information with me, but before I received the email request, I had written down the request and had spoken to the demographer about it. And when he looked at it on his application, the east side of Antioch Road covered several census blocks that had too large of a population. And so when he totaled it up, he wasn't able to make the change. And I apologize, I don't have the numbers of those census blocks with me. But if you'd like, I can ask for that information and relay it to you.
I would like to know the total size of it originally, and the request that I made that dealt with Ed Harris to West Antioch Drive. How much of it did that entail? Because it sounds like there wasn't any consideration given to the entire block. And I don't know what size they are, how much they entail. I'd like to know that too. Thank you.
Sure, I can reassure you that we did give close consideration to that request, but because of the way the census blocks and the populations of those census blocks, we found that it wasn't possible to move the east side of the road into District 4. But I'll provide that information to you.
Well, I guess then my real interest would be in the size of a census block, and how do you determine that?
Yes, sir. I can.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Can I push that just a minute? Can you explain what a census block is, number one?
Sure, yes.
And number two, it sure seems like the last time redistricting occurred, they literally down a street, 3 houses, and then 2 would be in different whatevers. My question is, why can you not break up a census block to deal with the kinds of things we're talking about?
So I'll start with the first question, explaining the census block. So the census divides up, let's say, a county into various groups. The three groups are tracts, which are, maybe you would take Granville County and divide it into maybe 10 tracts. Beneath a tract, there are block groups, which are groups of different blocks. And then the smallest the smallest component of the census are blocks. And the term comes from a city block, right? And so if you were to go to New York City, they literally would just take one block of New York City, and that's how they would divide up the city and count the census information, block by block. As the census moves to more rural communities or suburbs where the blocks aren't in nice, neat grid patterns, they still retain the terminology of a block, where they divide the county up by block based on oftentimes street roads. Sometimes where they draw the line doesn't necessarily make sense, but that's the smallest unit of measurement that the census provides us. So as we go through the districting process with the objective of being mindful of total population and various demographics, drawing along the census blocks give us the greatest amount of clarity and confidence that when we draw the lines and we report a total population, we're confident based on the census information that this district is comprised of a certain number of census blocks. We can take the information from those census blocks and report an accurate number to the board and to the public of the reported population and demographics of that county. And so we try to draw along census blocks, and I would say most maps drawn are along census blocks. You can deviate from census blocks. However, what it causes is some uncertainty about the populations associated with the districts. And so should the county be subject to a lawsuit, it's much more difficult to prove what a certain population is of a district should you deviate from the census blocks. And so the default is to draw along census blocks. However, it is possible, for instance, we could discuss Antioch Road. If the boards were committed to moving just the eastern part of Antioch Road into District 4, it is possible that you could do, I guess, a meets and bounds boundary where you say that the census blocks determine the districts, and these are the populations, but we've made a few adjustments aside from the census blocks for administrative purposes or for keeping communities of interest together. But there's an acknowledgement that the final map, which deviates from the census blocks, and the statistics associated with the final map are a little different than what the census blocks report. And so commonly what we try to do is we try to draw along census blocks, but it is possible to deviate from census blocks. But that's actually a move that the board would work with me on. We actually wouldn't go to the demographer, because at that point we're actually taking a step away from the census information. So it would be what I call maybe post-census adjustments to get a final map.
And doesn't that open you up, though, to, as you said, potential lawsuits? The
It
deviation?
does. It does, but from a practical perspective, the smaller the tweaks, the less likely you're going to invite a lawsuit. But should you want to draw, if we were to just take a magic marker and just kind of redraw the districts totally apart from census blocks, you would really run a risk of causing issues. But if you were to do what I call very narrow adjustments, it's kind of it's a cost-benefit analysis of the benefit to the community of drawing a line that way versus the potential risk of not having perfectly accurate population and demographic data associated with the maps.
Question. Looking at the Antioch Road situation, who would sue?
Pardon?
If we did the partial Antioch Road, you said we'd be subject to a lawsuit, and I said, who would sue us?
For that change,
Yeah. The other part of Antioch Road, maybe?
I don't know. That Commissioner, I'm sorry, board member, I would have to. It's not obvious who would sue in that situation, and so that's a risk that the two boards could wish to undertake. I will say most boards that I work with have consistently stayed with the census block information because it's a more risk-averse approach.
So
more cautious.
you're
Yes,
saying
sir.
that you never had no board, county deviate from the census blocks?
This year I have not. We have discussed it in another county, and then at the end, the county decided that they would just stick with the census blocks because the deviation they wanted wasn't that significant, so they just left it as is.
We need to have some more conversation, I think.
Pardon, sir?
I said, you and I need to have some more conversation about this, I think.
Certainly.
Is there any questions from the county commissioners? Go ahead, Commissioner May.
Two questions.
Sure.
If we were to consider a deviation there, I can assure you, there'll be others that would want to consider deviations.
I suspect so. We'd open the floodgates. Yeah.
One being me, who lost my neighbors, literally.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so that being the case, there is, we were notified, our board was notified this weekend by a citizen that the boards were gathering today in the context that we were somehow contriving and somehow moving and shaking so that we could devise our boundaries in a way that would be most beneficial for us. And so, in fairness, as I've gone through this process, we've had a minimal amount of requests, and in the requests we've had, many have been rejected. So can you kind of give the public just a snapshot of what we've done since we started, why we've done it, and that really that this is a legally and lawfully driven process in which we may have some input, but in reality is that input is not in line with law, the rule of law, then it will not occur.
Yes, so I'd be happy to recap the process. So as you recall, it started with a presentation on the law governing the redistricting process. When we finally had census data, we made a presentation that established that there were certain districts that were far too large and a few districts that were too small. As we went through the redrawing process, the first maps drawn and presented to the boards were drawn by a demographer without any input from the boards. In other words, it was a completely agnostic approach that was focused on three primary objectives. The first of which was balancing total population. The second of which was being mindful of the VRA districts in Granville County, which are districts 1 and districts 4. And the third was being mindful of the incumbents. As we made changes, we wanted to keep incumbents in the districts in which they currently run. And that's perfectly lawful. That's recognized by the courts. Once we had gone through those three changes without any input from the boards, we presented, I believe, 2 maps for the boards to consider at a public meeting. During that public meeting, the commissioners and board members came up by district and addressed changes with me. The changes that were requested amounted to no more than maybe a dozen changes in total, most of them being very small deviations, most often focused on communities of interest, where they would say, this neighborhood is split between my district and my neighboring district, I'd like it to keep it together. Antioch Road is split between District 2 and District 4, we'd like to keep it together. And based on those requests, we tried to run them, and we tried to make them, and were limited only by total population or potential demographic restrictions. And based on the changes that we could make and could not make, we presented Plan 5, which is the result of the process. And so I believe it's been a very transparent process. It's been agnostic from the start, and the amount of requests we've had from the board members has been, I'd say, minimal, would be the proper description of that.
Thank you.
Board members, do you have any? School board members, anybody?
Anybody on my side? Okay.
Yeah. I'm perfectly willing to go along with the census blocks, but if we're gonna step outside the bounds and accommodate 1 or 2, I have some concerns I'd like to raise if you go that route, if we decide to go that route, and I'm sure there's others here that have similar concerns that they would like to raise and move the lines just a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Well, when you say concerns, do you mean there are changes you'd like to make where you move
Absolutely.
lines? Okay.
Yes, sir.
So the decision to move lines, to deviate from the census block is part policy, part legal, right? And so I could advise you I will probably say there's a certain point where you've deviated from the census block so much that you've put yourself at risk of a potential lawsuit because there's no great way to verify the populations and the demographics of the districts. But subject to that point, it's largely a policy decision made by the two boards in terms of what changes they would like to make, how many changes they would like to make. And so I have to leave it, it is in your hands, right? I am here to serve you. That's a route we can take. I will say, though, in terms of common practice and being cautious towards potential litigation, you tend to resolve district lines along the census blocks because there's clarity and certainty there. But it is not it's not an absolute legal requirement that you do so.
Are there any other questions from either board? No questions, okay? Well then, I guess this comes to the part that I need the list of public comments. Thank you very much. All right. We have two for public comments for the districting. And my handy dandy Deborah has moved up to help me out here. Samantha Harris. The podium's up there, ma'am. And you'll have 3 minutes, and if you'll give your name and address so we have it for our records, we'd greatly appreciate it.
Good afternoon. I am Samantha Harris. I am a resident of Paddington Community at 2113 Orchard Court. I just had a couple of things that I wanted to ask or say. One is I understand that we are talking about redistricting, but I just wanted to be sure that as you all go forward and you're voting, to be sure that it's not just about voting, but it's voting and the schools and the people that make up all of these communities. My second thing is, as we have been looking, I'm sorry, I forgot to turn my phone off. Please forgive me. Ms. Pulliam, will you turn my phone off for me? Thank you so much. The second thing is we have so many elementary schools in this area, and as we grow, as we redistrict, as we do everything else, we're stuck with 2 high schools plus the charter schools that we have in the area. But this has majorly impacted all of the stuff that we're doing with moving the schools, but we're going to have it again if we have only this little bit of one thing in one corner and a little bit in another corner and a little bit. We have to look at the whole county. My whole life I've lived in Granville County, and we see each other as the northern half and the southern half. But as you all vote, can we look at this as an entire county? That's everything that we do becomes a domino effect for everything else.
1 minute.
I'm sorry?
1 minute left.
Okay, my last question is, I was in another meeting and you all talked about the impact of the institutions in Butner. When you all were looking at the piece of the pie, did you look at the fact that some of the patients who we have in those institutions are not residents of Granville County? They are from other counties. And if they have the right to vote because they've been deemed competent, are they going to have voting rights in our county, or are they going to have to go back to the county that they reside in? Thank you all for all of what you do. Thank you all for taking the time out to have so many meetings, and thank you for my time on the floor.
Thank you very much. Donna Plume. And also you'll have 3 minutes, and if you could give your address, your name and address for the record.
Hello, my name is Donna Pulliam, and my address is 331 Howland Court. I am a part of Whitehall Community, and I realize this meeting is about redistricting. However, I have some concerns about the movement that will be taking place on Highway 15 as you move students from South Granville to Granville Central. The traffic will greatly increase southbound. There's currently no stoplight there. Just a left-hand turn signal. So there's great concern about the number of students, and in addition to the number of students that are driving, the increase in time for the further southern half of the county that will increase their drive time. I got a call Friday and a text yesterday.
Just a reminder, this is about voting for the district, redistricting. So
Right.
continue, but I just want to
Yes.
remind you that.
About buses, there's apparently a bus driver shortage. So if we're going to have, we're talking about busing students, we're going to have a real problem if you cannot accommodate bus drivers for what we have in the county today than what we're looking for tomorrow. Again, I am, as Samantha said, think about the entire county and the impact that it has on the residents. I'm a voter. I've been a resident for over 20 years. I don't know all of the history of Granville County, but my children have attended South Granville. So those are the concerns that I would just like to be kept in mind when you're thinking about this entire process.
Thank you very much. Okay, those are the only two I have signed up for public comments. So we will go on. And this is, again, we've got discussion of both boards. If there's anything you all want to just discuss now, this is the time to do it. Anybody on?
Madam Chair, can we get the quick explanation of where do we go from here?
Okay.
I know we're not voting on anything today, at least that's my understanding.
Right.
So what would we do next?
So I guess I'm best suited to provide that explanation. So we'll work, okay, let's operate under the assumption that the boards were to agree, or at least the majority of both boards would agree that they are satisfied with the maps, right? Once we reach that point, whether that's these maps or maps with subsequent changes, the next step would be a meeting in which the boards adopt a resolution that would have two parts. The first resolution would be a finding that there is substantial inequality under the current districts, which means there's an obligation to rebalance them. And then the second part of the resolution would be a recital of the process and a description of the new maps to be adopted by the two boards. And so the boards would then pass that resolution and the process would be completed. As a reminder, the deadline to do so is November 17th. For the commissioners, there's not a hard deadline for the school board. However, it's recommended they probably stick to the same process, especially if they're going to adopt the same maps. And then after that, it's a matter of the Board of Elections working a lot to put the new maps into place. But at that point, I'm no longer involved.
Thank you.
Could you explain the prisons, how that would work if there are people in there that are able to vote? Would they vote here? Would they vote in the county they were from?
Yes. So as we redrew the maps, we excluded the prison population for terms of, for the purposes of determining how many people lived in a district, right? And so as currently drawn, I believe the institutions in Butner would be in District 3. As we counted the population of District 3, we determined to exclude the prison population for purposes of drawing the boundaries. That does not affect the voting rights of anybody who resides in those prisons, right? All we're doing through this process is determining where to draw the boundaries for the commissioners and the school board members. This process does not affect the voting rights of anyone. So to the extent we've excluded the prison population for purposes of counting the people living in the district, if for whatever reason there was somebody at the prison population who is eligible to vote, they would nonetheless be eligible to vote. Whether they could vote in Granville County or vote absentee in another county is something that this board cannot influence. That is a matter of state law and federal law, and so we have no input on that. The only reason we consider the prison population, again, is for determining the total population. It does not affect voting rights of anybody in the prison.
Thank you.
And I just want to get that clarification. So what you're saying is the prison population who is available to vote and can vote in their district, no matter what district it is.
Well, whether or not they can vote in their district is something that we cannot influence. That's a matter of state law. And so to the extent they are residing in the prison and were eligible to vote in the district under state law, they can still do so, regardless of how we draw the districts.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
this is
they're in the district where the institution is District 3, but their home of address is District 1, that's where they can go to vote. Is that what you're saying, or just clarify?
Depending on where they're registered to vote. So if they had
Depending
changed
on
their
where
registration.
they're registered at.
Yeah, so if they had changed their registration to now be in District 3, they would be eligible to vote in District 3. If they retained their existing registration in District 1, to the extent they were eligible to, they could vote by absentee in District 1. Although technically, if they're incarcerated, they'd have to vote by absentee because you can't really go to a polling place. There's
Right.
guards in the way. So I guess they would all be voting absentee.
Okay.
So let me go ahead,
No.
Commissioner Jay, go ahead.
Clear me up.
Sure.
When, not Commissioner, spoke about the sensitive block and changing it and making a change, what would happen if we don't vote for the way the maps is now and they wanted to change it? What would happen then?
So, well, I guess the process, if the boards were to go down that route, we would solicit and I guess agree upon changes that we would make to the current map that would deviate slightly from the census block boundaries. And the board would, in its final resolution, adopt a map that acknowledged that the lines were drawn primarily along census blocks, and these are the associated census blocks, but we had these 3, 4, 5 deviations, and we would have a detailed description of these deviations. So that would result in a final map. What would happen next is, to the extent there was a concerned citizen who thought the way we deviated from the census blocks resulted in population imbalances that were kind of hidden based on the fact that we're not reporting accurate information about the districts, or adjusted the demographic information of Districts 1 or Districts 4, which are VR8 districts, they would have an argument for a lawsuit because they could say, well, I know that you reported the census information, right, but the census information you're reporting doesn't actually map where the districts are drawn. And so we're saying that the census information is not an accurate reflection and that there could be an imbalance based on the way the maps are actually drawn based on these 4 or 5 deviations. And again, the extent of risk of that happening depends on the number of deviations and how great those lines are as they vary from the actual boundaries of a census block. So the more the deviations, the greater you deviate from the edge of a census block, the more uncertainty it creates about the actual populations of the districts. And so that's the risk you create, because that uncertainty could expose you to a lawsuit. Could. I cannot put a percentage on the likelihood of it resulting in a lawsuit.
I have another question.
Yes, ma'am.
And this is based on listening to Ms. Harris there, which could possibly apply across other districts. And prior to her coming up, there was a discussion with regards to District 5 and 6 in Paddington, where you said you're from, that area. Now, based on that, with District 5 and 6 and other discussions, if in fact, she mentioned about, her children in school, if one of the, let's just say between whatever goes on between District 5 and 6 and how that's broken out based on the redistricting, would that impact where her children go to school now and possibly would have to go to another school based on the redistricting? Does it have an impact?
I don't believe so. No, I mean, all I've been engaged by the boards to do is to determine the voting districts. I have no say in the
Yeah,
school
I'll
districts.
answer that.
All right,
No, it
ahead.
doesn't change a thing.
Uh-huh.
And it really is only a minute, I think we're talking about 23 homes. That splits the neighborhood.
I would really hope that we would understand that we're talking about commissioner districts and school board member districts and not school attendance zone lines. They're not the same thing.
That's my, I'm asking for the clarification.
Not
Thank
the
you.
same thing.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
So in other words, we really don't have a choice. It has to go legally. We have census blocks that are racially, this or that or whatever, and we have to do so many percentage-wise of this and so many of that. And so we really don't get to say which district we want to put a block of people in, because then that would throw our numbers off. Is that what you're kind of saying?
There are limitations in what changes you can make, because everything is subject to statistics that we must comply with, both in terms of total population and being mindful of the black voting age populations in Districts 1 and Districts 4.
And this, excuse me, this is state law and federal law that we're talking.
Correct, both state law and federal law require us to be mindful of those population numbers.
So it really has nothing to do with the county or the school boards. These are laws that we have to comply with.
That's correct.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure everybody understood that.
And you don't have the associated demographics that you need to defend something or without exhaustive research if you separate something from the census blocks.
That is
You
accurate.
have to go back and then recreate that at a cost.
That's exactly true. You would have to find a way to measure what population was moved based on the deviation from the census block.
That data is lost once you disrupt the block.
Correct. That's absolutely correct. Which is why the vast majority of bodies that redistrict stick with census blocks, because of the certainty it provides.
Do we have any other discussion on either board? Okay. Any other matters on either board? Do you have more matters?
I don't think unless the man is out.
Uh-oh. Well, has anybody got any other matters they want to speak about? I'm giving you one last chance. Is there anything you want to talk about? Except for, that's not, that only has to do with the redistricting. I won't say anything. All right. Nobody? All right. So the next meeting is when?
It is.
The 15th at 2 o'clock. Same place? Same time? Oh, it's at 2, not 1, I'm sorry. All right? Yes, ma'am.
Why are the meetings held in the middle of the day when there's less opportunity for people that may be interested in these meetings to attend rather than at a later time of the day? Because I have the flexibility, but not everyone has that flexibility. And I don't want to use my lunch as a time to attend these meetings. But can some thought be given to, because this is very important to me, and I'm sure other parents. You know, they want to be a part of the process. So can some thought be given to take into account that meetings are held at a fairer time of the day?
I don't know the answer to that question, and I'm not sure who to even ask it from. Do you know?
Well, I think we make up that decision, don't we? What time the meetings are?
Right, okay.
If I can, on this meeting time question, it came up via email over the weekend, and I think it was addressed earlier.
Right.
We've got 14 individuals on these two boards that we're trying to get a consensus on time with. So that is a monumentous task, and then taking public into consideration as an open meeting, obviously, is paramount, but a lot of people aren't available at 7 p.m. in the evening. Some folks would prefer to do it at 5 a.m. Do you know what I'm saying? So you're gonna run the gamut. The third shift people aren't gonna be happy. So this has gotta be done by November 17th.
Yeah, we have run out of time.
Got the clock.
We are no longer.
So I apologize that we're not able to accommodate schedules in that regard, but
I also thought we were trying to establish the meetings at a time in which the attorneys were available. And
Right.
that, working with their schedule, I don't object to having the meetings at any time, open for the public. It's all good with me, complete transparency. I'm concerned about the same email because it appeared that we had some type of special brew going on that we don't. As you can see, it's all lawful, it's all driven by demographics. There's really little input that we're having here other than the requested minor tweaks in which, as you heard articulated by the attorney, most of which were denied. All of our districts changed considerably. I'm in District 5, mine changed considerably. And so, but I'm open to have it at any time. I'm all about transparency for the public, that's a good thing. But that was my understanding of some of the hurdles that the county manager and the Board of Education's office had to overcome, was to dot the i's and cross the t's as to when all sitting members could attend and council. So,
And also that day is the day that both the county commissioners and the school board meet later in the evening. And so this was a time that we could actually all get together and meet, because by law, we both have to have our meetings on that day and at that time. So it's kind of hard to move this meeting up any further in case there's a lot of discussion. So I understand totally, but we are so pressed for time right now. I mean, we're talking, this has to be done for us by the 17th. We have no choice.
Attorney, could you kind of explain to the public in regards to how difficult it's been getting stenographer
Yes.
to kind of assist us to bring
Yes.
these meetings more closely together, because it's not just been, we're not arbitrarily just picking out dates, we're trying to punch everything in a timely manner.
Right, so the time constraints we are facing is not because of a decision by the boards, it's because of the census data information. Historically, the census data has been available in the spring, which leaves the counties and the legislatures several months to go through the redistricting process. Because of the complications caused by the pandemic, the census data was not released until September. And so the time frame to do so was truncated from over half a year to about 2 months. And so when we came to the board, we had a very limited time frame, and then what compounds that is the entire nation is redistricting right now. And so there's a limited number of professionals who can actually manipulate the data to generate the maps. And so we're working under tremendous pressure to try to insert the county's demands and a long queue of demands that the demographers are working on. And so the timing we've faced has been a matter of the situation, and I think we've adapted to it, I should say, rather than us dictating the timing. We're kind of the victims of the timing, is the way I describe it. And I would say the boards have been very patient with me and the demographer as we've gone through this process, understanding the situation we're facing.
I can offer one other thing, the possibility for the people that are working, if they would like to submit written comments and get it to the our board, we would be glad to have those read and to get everybody's opinion out there. So, I mean, looking at our time restraint, I think that's really the best we could do right now, is if you want to do something written.
What about, isn't there a maximum amount of people that can speak? No?
No. But just remember, this is about redistricting.
I understand that.
It's not re-school, it's redistricting. So, I mean, it does have something to do with it. It's more about the voters who vote for me or vote for him. It's not, it hasn't got anything really to do with what schools kids go to or that type of stuff. But it's who you vote for. Does that make more sense? Okay, so we'll leave it at that. We'll leave it at 2 o'clock, and we'll have written comments, and we can have those read at proper time at the meeting. Okay? Any other thing that needs to be discussed? All right, I'm gonna,
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
You're the one that have to put something, I'm asking the question. With regards to that next meeting, starting at 2 o'clock, and of course, we have the working session starting at 6, the expectations that's gonna be put on the table at that session is what you're gonna bring back based on what we just discussed today. You know, I'm just, because everybody seems to be fairly, okay, we have not had much changes, and I doubt we're gonna make it till 5 o'clock session because we're almost down on this agenda item at this time. So when we come back to the session on the 15th at 2, and we want to close things out, that's what we're saying, because we have a deadline on the 17th. So the expectations then that we're gonna be looking for when we come back here on the 15th is basically everybody to go ahead, decide whatever, and reach consensus and push this on over so it can be, you know, pushed on to the Board of Elections. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. I mean, absent receiving instructions from the boards, I will start drafting a resolution that would allow the boards to pass the resolution and adopt the maps, and this process would conclude on the 15th.
Okay. Great.
so the 15th would be a public hearing, so that we can hopefully get this board, you know, get this done. No?
Wait a minute. No.
A public meeting.
It's a public meeting. Oh, okay, I'm sorry. It's a public meeting. When is the,
You're correct now, public meeting, not a public hearing.
okay, when is the public hearing?
Not required.
Oh, it's not required. Okay, public comment. I'm sorry, I thought I had it backwards. I apologize. All right, so anything else?
One
Commissioner
question.
Gooch.
Just for clarification, the maps are pretty much drawn the way they're gonna be. And all we'll be doing is taking a formal vote on accepting those. Is that correct?
Based on the discussion we've had today, that's what I expect. But again, you know, the decision of whether or not the maps are final is to the boards.
Okay.
But assuming I don't receive any further instructions to make changes, then the maps are final, and the resolution that will be presented will be adopting the maps that we discussed today.
Okay, but even if we submit minor changes, you don't have to go with those because to break out the census blocks, you don't have to break those down.
So I don't understand the follow-up
Okay,
question, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, maybe
Yeah.
I didn't make myself clear. If you start breaking down census blocks into micro areas, then, you know, if we do it for one, I think we should open it up for everyone. Because everyone has issues with
Right.
where the lines are drawn in their districts.
Yes, sir.
So, I would suggest that for the sake of time, we go with what we have. If we decide not to, then we're gonna have to have another meeting because everyone's gonna have suggestions.
Yes, I would agree. I mean, my recommendation to the board based on practices, best practices would be to adopt maps as drawn based on the census block information without any deviations. Should the boards want to pursue a different route, that's not necessarily foreclosed, but it could open up a Pandora's box of changes and uncertainty.
Thanks. Thank you.
Madam Chair, if I'm correct, are these maps available for the public at the libraries?
Yes. Yes, they are.
So,
And-
so just, could you just make an announcement to the
Okay,
public?
so they are at the library and at the,
The South Branch Library, the Richard H. Thornton Library, at the 141 Williamsboro Street location where the tax department is in the hall, they're hanging. And they're also at the administration office on Bell Street, 104 Bell Street.
So the public could go there and they could review the maps that we have here, and if they had any further comments, they can make them.
And the website.
oh, and they are on the website.
Yep.
All right, but today is the day. If there's any request to make any changes, today is your last chance.
I believe we've had a request, have we not? Mr. Peace? I mean, I guess what I'm getting at, and please understand, I'm serving as the vice chair of this meeting. I think that if we have folks on the school board or the commissioners who want to get into some minor changes or whatever, they have every right to bring that up. And to be driven by, we can't do this because of X, Y, but we could. But to have any changes made at this point, we talk about wanting to make changes, but the answer from you is no, we're through. And I'm not, you know, I just think it's really important that no matter what the issue, no matter how hard it might be, if it's legal, if it can be considered, that we have a right to have that at least looked at or talked with or whatever again. I mean, it is a formal request that he has made, and it's almost like he's just being dismissed.
So I'm not dismissive of this request, and I think I've made clear several times, absent instructions from the board, we will proceed with these maps. The majority of voices I have heard over the course of this meeting is that we do not want to deviate from census blocks, which means even though we do have an individual request, the boards, or at least the majority of the two boards, are likely to vote that we're going to adopt maps based on a census block. And in light of the fact that a majority of the boards would control whether or not we adopt the maps, I'm operating under the assumption that ultimately the two boards are not going to want to deviate from the census blocks.
But you don't know that.
Excuse me. I had several questions that I asked during the time that you were supposed to get back with me on, and I assumed you were going to do that.
Yes, I can still get you that information, sir. Yes, and I plan to.
Okay.
But providing that information and drawing boundaries that deviate from census blocks are two different things. And I have not received an instruction from the boards. And in fact, and again, this is not my decision. This is the decision among the boards on whether or not they want to deviate from the census blocks. But I will, as I've said, should we do so, it's not going to be just Antioch Road. I suspect it's going to be every commissioner, every board member wanting small deviations. And it's going to be a complicated process. And if we total up all those small deviations, there could create uncertainty about how accurate our map is and whether or not it's defensible in a lawsuit. So the best practice and the practice I would recommend would be staying with the census blocks. But again, that is not my decision. I serve the boards, and so it's up to the boards. I would liken this to the discussion we had at the first meeting over whether or not you gross up or down populations based on anticipated growth. And the boards had a discussion and gave me instructions that we're going to work on the exact population provided by the census data and not make forecasts. And so this is similar to that, where the boards would need to provide instruction on which way they want to go.
So am I hearing correctly, if I may, that if the boards are interested in you drawing the maps a different way, there needs to be some action on that today?
I would need,
You would need clear instruction that comes from a majority.
that would be ideal, given the amount of work that would go into it and the number of changes that would be invited. I think it would be good for the boards to have clear instruction on that's the path we're going to take or not take, given that we're working with less than 2 weeks, should we choose to go down that path. Yes, ma'am.
So should we have a vote on whether or not to deviate from the census blocks?
I think that would be a good idea. Clarity on this point would be helpful.
Okay.
Definitely, I really feel that we're wavering here, because I do think something has to be placed on it. I was about to go out of this meeting thinking, hey, everything is okay. When we come to the next session, it's gonna be a vote. But clearly, some answers have not been given, whether if we accept what was presented about the census block or dismiss or vote and whatever. It's open, and you don't want to get to the last meeting and say, oh, we can't make a decision here because we didn't do something at the last meeting. It's-
Does it matter that we have 3 people missing?
No, we have a quorum.
Okay, I was just curious.
All right, so we're back to discussion.
So and unfortunately, we don't have access to the data that shows the fun shapes that census tracts come in, nor that no two census blocks, make sure I use the right terminology. No two blocks not only are not the same shape, however, they do not contain the same number of people.
Yes, census
Yes,
blocks can
so-
have 2 people to 200 people.
You may think that you're gonna get 2 or 3 houses on a street, but in actuality, because of the fact that some are shaped like bananas and some are shaped like squares, you may get 100 homes instead of just 1 or 2. And I think to deviate from the census data, which is our defense point for a lawsuit, and we are not required apparently to continue to be under the VRA. Is that correct? VRA, Voting Rights Act legislation, is that sunsetted? Is that my understanding? To use race as a predominant factor, that was a board decision early on in the process, correct?
So we're still compliant with the VRA in terms of minority districts.
Correct, because of this board's decision, these
Yes.
combined boards' decisions.
Well, and the VRA is still valid law,
Still
Section
valid.
2. Section 5 has been
Thank you for
struck
that.
down.
Thank you for that additional.
That's Department of Justice pre-clearance. That's no longer part of the process.
Right.
But being mindful of
That
VRA
was what I was
districts is still
speaking
part
to.
of the process, yes.
So the whole point of using those census tracts is because we have enumerated data from the federal government and Census Bureau that says how many people of what delineation are in each of those tracts. And if we just take a scalpel and carve out houses here and houses there, it throws out all of that census data. And the fact that it's a X percentage, we talked about District 1, I have written down 47.8%. Is that the correct number?
Yes.
47.8%. So if we change one census tract, that number goes away. We don't know what that number is provable. It would completely lose our leg to stand on. So if you wanted as a form of a motion, I would say that I would offer a motion that we stick with the prescribed census tracts from the U.S. Census Bureau.
So you've made that a motion,
if that's appropriate.
okay? Does this,
Blocks.
blocks, okay.
Thank you.
So do we need a second from a county commissioner?
I'm gonna second that, Madam Chair, with a comment too. I don't think none of us in this room are 100% satisfied with our redrawing. I'm gonna just say, use District 1 and 2, for instance. I've lost a lot of people. I've gained some people. He's gained people. He's lost people. And Mr. Peace, you and I both have lost and gained people. And all of us in this room not 100% satisfied, but we've got to work with what we got to work with. So I'll second that motion based on that comment.
Okay, so, and is there any other discussion with the commissioners? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those not? Motion carries for the commissioner side.
Okay. Board members, we need a motion similar to the other motion. Right, what was, Deborah, have you got that motion?
To offer to stick with the census blocks.
Do we have a motion for that?
I'll make that motion.
We have a motion from Ms. LeBrecq. Is there a second?
Everybody's not gonna be happy either way we go. So I'm gonna second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carries, I believe. Do we want to
I have 4 to 1. Is that
Yeah,
right?
4 to 1, yeah, so we good.
okay, all right. We are 4 to 1. Thank you.
They were 4 to 1. Okay, so
Thank you.
everybody's happy? Happier, as happy as we can get?
A little happy, but not really.
Okay. Well, let's go ahead. Is there any other discussion? I'm
I have a
offering-
question,
Yes, ma'am.
just not relative to the vote particularly, but is there a way or website that people can go to and look at census tracts, or is that something that's not available yet?
It's not available yet. So it would be very nice if that's something that the public can be involved in, and even the board members, or if you wanted to do your own homework, you could, but there's not a website that allows you to do so easily yet.
Doesn't WRAL.com have a whatever kind of thing where you can actually go on and find a census tract? I went back there and that's where I found out plus 37 and minus 16. So there is something, and
Okay.
maybe it's not a census tract, but it's a way of seeing what, you're right, they're
Yeah.
all over the place and they're goofy looking and all that good stuff,
Yeah.
but anyway.
I'm not familiar with the tool, and I'll say I don't use, there's no tool that I am familiar with that I've relied upon. I've worked solely with the demographer and the program he has.
Thank you.
Do you anticipate the availability of the census blocks in the near future, online?
So-
In some form or fashion?
I don't know if I could say near future, but in the past, there have been online applications that would allow the public to try to do some type of redistricting based on census data. I'm aware of at least one application that was complicated but publicly available through a website. At this point, that application, I think it's called Dave's Redistricting App, created by a guy named Dave. I have looked at it over the course of this process, and it's not available to the public yet. And so, aside from that, I'm not available of a similar option that would allow you to study the census data.
Mr. Hobgood, so I'm not computer savvy at all. So is there a possibility of putting a link on the county website to the WRAL, whatever?
Least-
Yeah, it's certainly possible, sure.
Just check it out, see if it's of value to you. Or to us. Okay, do we have anything else? Madam Chairperson, woman,
I don't.
person?
Anything else on this side?
I'm curious. So if we just voted, why are we having another meeting?
The resolution.
For public,
Just for
Post-resolution.
public resolution? Okay, thank you. I was curious.
okay. So I need a motion from the county commissioners to close this
Make a
meeting?
motion, we adjourn.
Okay. A second, please?
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second to adjourn. Is there any other questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those not? Motion has carried.
Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We have a motion and a second from Mr. Peace. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.
I know. I was trying to let you.